Lena Hale stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Richard Hale's profile photo glowed softly. A handsome man in his mid-30s, sharp suit, confident smile. She had met him online, through a dating site promising serious relationships, and over the past 2 weeks, his messages had become the center of her world. There was something magnetic about him. His words precise, his attention unrelenting, his charm intoxicating. She remembered the first time he called. His voice was calm, soothing, with a timbre that made her stomach flutter. "You deserve someone who appreciates every part of you," he said. Lena had blushed, gripping her phone like a lifeline. She had felt that promise, a strange and immediate trust. Yet there was a darkness in the edges of their conversations. Sometimes, when she asked him about his past, he would deflect with a joke or a vague reference to things better left unsaid. Lena brushed it off, telling herself everyone had secrets, everyone had shadows. But the curiosity lingered, gnawing at her like a faint itch she couldn't scratch. Over video calls, he seemed flawless, impeccably dressed, his apartment immaculately tidy, books stacked in perfect order. But sometimes the camera angle was just so, the corners of the room obscured, shadows falling oddly. Lena noted these small details and dismissed them. She wanted to believe in him, to trust the man who made her feel special, wanted, seen. Then came the proposal. A weekend of constant calls, texts, and carefully curated conversations had built a foundation of intimacy fast enough to feel real. "I know it's sudden," he had typed one evening, "but I don't want to waste any more time. Marry me, Lena. Let's not wait." Her heart pounded at the thought. She had wanted this. Love, escape, someone to anchor her in a world that felt unpredictable. Without hesitation, she accented. "Yes," she had typed, trembling, and immediately felt both exhilaration and a shadow of unease. Weeks passed. The planning was swift. Richard's attention was unwavering, his presence constant. Lena's friends warned her to slow down, to reconsider, but she brushed it off. He was different. He was perfect, or at least that's what she told herself. The night before leaving for Virginia to meet him in person, Lena sat alone in her apartment. The laptop screen reflected her anxious eyes. She reviewed messages, videos, his voice clips, every piece of digital life he had shared. A nagging thought crept in. Had she really met him, or only the version he wanted her to see? Still, excitement won. She booked her flight, packed her bags, and felt a thrill at the prospect of stepping into the life he had promised. The mansion, the vineyard, the luxurious lifestyle, all images he had painted so vividly, so convincingly. Her phone buzzed one last time that night. Richard's name flashed across the screen. She answered immediately. "Tomorrow," he said, voice smooth, controlled, reassuring. "Tomorrow, we begin." "Yes," Lena whispered, barely able to contain her anticipation. She went to sleep with a mixture of hope and a faint, lingering uncertainty. She could not know that the screen had been only the first layer of a web, a carefully constructed illusion designed to draw her in, one click, one call, one promise at a time. When she awoke the next morning, bags packed, tickets in hand, she felt that intoxicating blend of excitement and nerves, unaware that crossing the threshold of the digital world into the real one would be the first step into something far darker than anything she had imagined. The morning Lena arrived in Virginia, fog clung to the rolling hills like pale silk. The driver sent by Richard said little during the 2-hour ride from the airport, though she tried to fill the silence with small talk. He only nodded, eyes fixed on the winding road that led them deeper into the countryside. Her heart fluttered between excitement and unease. She had replayed this moment in her head for weeks. The day she'd finally meet her husband in person, see their home, start a new life. When the car turned past the stone gates, the mansion revealed itself. Vast, symmetrical, draped in ivy. White columns rose from the porch like frozen sentinels. The air felt heavier here, scented with wet earth and old wood. As the car stopped, Lena caught sight of a woman standing near the entrance, gray-haired, stiff posture, apron immaculate. The housekeeper. She didn't smile. "Mrs. Hale," she said with a slight bow. "Welcome to Hale Estate." Lena forced a polite grin. "Please call me Lena." The woman's eyes flickered with something unreadable. "Mr. Hale will join you shortly." Inside, the mansion was a world of marble and shadow. Her footsteps echoed across the floors, mingling with the ticking of a distant clock. Paintings lined the hallway, portraits of strangers in somber colors. The silence was thick enough to feel. She trailed her fingers along the banister, every detail so perfect it felt unreal. Then she saw him. Richard Hale stood at the far end of the corridor, framed by the glow of afternoon light through stained glass. He looked exactly as he had on video, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver at his temples and a quiet confidence in his smile. But in person, there was something else, a gravity to his presence that pulled her in and frightened her at once. "Lena," he said softly, his voice smooth as velvet. "You're even more beautiful than I imagined." He kissed her cheek, his lips cool against her skin. She wanted to melt into the warmth of his gaze, but part of her noticed the faint tremor in his hand. Or maybe it was hers. He guided her through the house like a curator leading a guest through a museum. "This was my grandfather's home," he said. "Built in 1904. Every piece of furniture here has a story." The rooms were pristine but lifeless. No trace of family photos, no clutter, no laughter lingering in the walls. Only order. Only control. When he showed her their bedroom, she hesitated at the threshold. The room was vast, with tall windows overlooking endless vineyards. The bed was made too perfectly, the curtains drawn too tightly. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Richard smiled. "It's ours now." Dinner that night was a quiet affair. The table stretched long enough to seat 20, but only 2 plates were set. The housekeeper, Mrs. Drew, served them in silence. The food was exquisite, though Lena barely tasted it. She tried to ask about the vineyard, the workers, his business trips. His answers were vague, rehearsed. When she asked about his family, he paused mid-bite and changed the subject. Later, as she unpacked in the dimly lit room, Lena heard a faint noise, like a door closing somewhere down the hall. She froze, listening. Then came another sound, softer, almost like a whisper. She stepped into the hallway, calling out, "Richard?" No response. Only the low hum of the air vents and the distant ticking clock. She returned to her room, trying to shake the chill from her spine. Maybe it was just the old house settling, she told herself. Still, when Richard came to bed, she noticed he locked the door from the inside before turning off the lamp. "Just habit," he said with a small smile. Lena nodded, forcing a laugh. "Of course." But as she lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, the silence of the mate, Ancien pressed around her, heavy, endless, and watching. And somewhere in the house, beneath the hum of the night, she thought she heard the faint creak of footsteps, retreating down a corridor that shouldn't have been used. Morning sunlight spilled through the mansion's tall windows, painting streaks of gold across the marble floor. Lena woke to an empty bed. Richard was already gone. His side of the pillow was cold, and for a moment, she couldn't remember hearing him leave. The silence felt heavier in daylight, like the house was holding its breath. A note sat on the dresser in Richard's elegant handwriting. Had to visit the vineyard. Back by evening. Explore your new home. She smiled faintly, though unease lingered. Explore was the last thing she wanted to do, yet curiosity gnawed at her. After breakfast, she wandered down the long hallways, her footsteps muffled on the Persian rugs. Every room she entered was immaculate, dustless, sterile, untouched. In one hallway, she noticed 3 doors, one slightly ajar, 2 locked. The unlocked one led to a guest room draped in white sheets. Dust motes floated in the air, catching light like falling snow. But what drew her eye was the wall of portraits, women, all painted in similar poses. Dark hair, soft eyes, delicate features. One looked strikingly familiar, too familiar. Her stomach twisted. The woman could have been her reflection, only older. The same shape of lips, the same slope of the chin. A small brass plaque beneath it read, Lena Hale, 2018. Mrs. Drew appeared suddenly behind her, her voice calm but sharp. That part of the house is private, Mrs. Hale. Lena jumped. I didn't mean to intrude. The older woman's expression softened, though her eyes did not. Best not to wander alone. Some doors are kept locked for a reason. Lena nodded, murmuring thanks. As the housekeeper turned away, Lena caught a faint smell of bleach. Strong, unnatural. She returned to the main hall, but the image of the portrait clung to her. Lena Hale. The same surname. She had never heard Richard mention a previous marriage. Had he? Maybe it was his mother, or an ancestor. But the date, 2018, was only 6 years ago. That evening, when Richard returned, Lena tried to sound casual over dinner. I noticed some paintings upstairs. Your family? He smiled, cutting his steak. Yes, family. Was one of them your... He interrupted, his tone clipped but polite. They're part of the house's history. I prefer not to dwell on the past. The conversation ended there. His voice carried a quiet warning that made her throat tighten. Later, when he went to take a call in his study, Lena roamed again. She found the west wing. Darker, cooler, doors sealed with brass locks. At the end of the corridor, a faint humming came from behind one of them. The sound of an old refrigerator? Or something mechanical? She leaned closer, listening, when a voice behind her made her spin around. Curiosity can be dangerous here. Mrs. Drew stood at the end of the hallway, her face half in shadow. I thought I heard something, Lena said, heart pounding. Old pipes, the woman replied flatly. The house has moods. Lena forced a smile. So I've noticed. That night, unable to sleep, she sat on the bed scrolling through her phone, searching for a Lena Hale, Virginia obituary. Nothing came up. Not a single record. She dug deeper. Property records, estate names, news archives. But then, as if on cue, her internet connection froze. When she glanced at the Wi-Fi icon, it showed network disabled. Moments later, Richard entered the room quietly. You're still awake, he said, smiling faintly. Lena slipped the phone under her pillow. Couldn't sleep. He sat beside her, brushing her hair back. You'll get used to the silence. It's peaceful once you stop fighting it. Shitty. He nodded, pretending to agree. But behind that tender tone, she sensed something darker. Control, possession. When he turned off the lamp and kissed her forehead, she lay awake, eyes open in the dark. The house creaked softly, as if listening. And somewhere down the hall, behind one of those locked doors, the low humming started again. Steadier now, almost rhythmic, like a machine meant to keep something, or someone, alive. The following evening, Richard informed Lena that they would be hosting guests. Just a few close friends, he said, smoothing the cuffs of his shirt. His tone was casual, but something about his insistence made her uneasy. She had barely adjusted to the house's suffocating quiet, and now strangers were coming to dinner. Mrs. Drew and a younger maid moved swiftly through the kitchen, preparing a lavish spread. Roasted duck, glazed vegetables, polished silverware that gleamed like mirrors. The scent of wine and rosemary filled the halls, momentarily softening the mansion's gloom. Lena stood before the mirror in their bedroom, wearing the dark green dress Richard had chosen for her. It fit perfectly, too perfectly, as if tailored from her measurements before he'd ever met her. When she walked downstairs, his eyes followed her in a way that made her feel admired and studied at once. "You look beautiful," he murmured. "Try to make a good impression tonight. They value discretion." "Discretion?" she repeated. But he didn't answer. By 7, 4 guests had arrived. 2 couples, elegantly dressed, their laughter polite but hollow. Richard introduced them quickly. Harold and Celeste Vane, Thomas and Evelyn Kerr. Their handshakes were soft, their smiles carefully measured. Lena felt like a prop placed at Richard's side. Dinner began beneath the glittering chandelier. Conversation drifted easily at first. Wine imports, real estate, politics. Lena tried to join in, but each time she spoke, someone changed the subject. When she mentioned the vineyard, Harold, as Fork froze midair. "Oh, the vineyard," he said, glancing at Richard. "Still operational?" Richard's smile stiffened. "Of course, just a small renovation underway." Celeste reached for her wine, her bracelet trembling slightly. "You always did prefer your privacy, Richard." Lena sensed tension tightening the air like an invisible thread. "I haven't seen the vineyard yet," she said lightly. "Maybe I could visit tomorrow?" No one replied. The sound of the clock filled the silence until Richard's hand found hers beneath the table. Firm, warning. After dessert, the guests drifted to the drawing room. Music played softly from an old gramophone. Lena noticed that none of them seemed to look at the portraits on the walls, especially the one of Lena Hale. Their eyes slid past it as if pretending it wasn't there. Celeste approached her near the fireplace, her perfume sharp and sweet. "You're brave," she whispered under her breath. Lena blinked. "I'm sorry." But Celeste only smiled faintly and turned away when Richard entered the room again. Later, as the guests left, Lena stood by the doorway watching their car lights fade down the long gravel drive. The moment they disappeared, Richard's hand rested on her shoulder, not tenderly but possessively. "You did well," he said softly. "But next time, let me lead the conversation." She turned to face him. "What was that about? They acted like..." "Like what?" His tone hardened. "Like they were afraid of you." He laughed, though there was no humor in it. "People fear what they don't understand. You'll learn that here." He kissed her forehead, then disappeared into his study, locking the door behind him. Lena lingered in the hallway, still hearing Celeste's whispered word, brave. She wandered toward the dining room, the air still heavy with the scent of wine and duck. The candle flames trembled as she moved past the table. Then she noticed something she hadn't seen before, a small red stain near the leg of the table, half hidden beneath the rug. It wasn't wine. She crouched, touching it lightly with her finger. Sticky. Dried. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the corridor, slow, deliberate. She straightened, heart hammering. Mrs. Drew appeared in the doorway, expression unreadable. "You should rest, Mrs. Hale. The master dislikes when guests dwell on small things." Lena swallowed hard. "Of course." She turned to leave, but as she reached the staircase, she couldn't resist glancing back. Mrs. Drew was on her knees, scrubbing at the rug, erasing the stain with practiced precision. That night, as rain began to fall against the windows, Lena lay awake, listening to the rhythm of drops mingling with the faint, mechanical hum behind the locked West Wing door. She closed her eyes, trying not to imagine what might need constant power in a place that should have been only silent. The rain hadn't stopped since the night of the dinner. For 2 days straight, gray light filtered through the mansion's tall windows, turning every room into a dim watercolor. Lena wandered through the halls aimlessly, her mind still caught on Celeste's whisper. "You're brave." Brave for what? For marrying him? For staying? Richard had left early that morning for another business meeting, leaving her alone with Mrs. Drew, who spoke little and smiled even less. The older woman moved through the house like a ghost, polishing silver and dusting shelves that didn't need cleaning. Lena felt watched, even in silence. By afternoon, she sat in the parlor, staring out at the vineyard slopes swallowed in mist. Her phone vibrated on the table, a private number flashing across the screen. She hesitated. Hardly anyone had this number except her sister and Richard. She answered. "Hello?" Static filled the line, then a trembling woman's voice. "Is this Lena Hale?" Her chest tightened. "Yes. Who is this?" "You don't know me," the woman said, "but you need to listen and carefully. You have to get out of that house." "What? Who is this?" The voice cracked, fragile and urgent. "He's not who you think he is. He—" The line distorted, a sharp burst of static swallowing the words. Then came the phrase that froze Lena's blood. "You're not the first one." The call ended. Lena stared at the phone, the echo of that voice looping in her mind. Not the first one. Her hands shook as she tried to redial, but the screen went black. No signal. She ran to the window, holding the phone toward the sky, desperate for a single bar. Nothing. The rain fell harder, smearing the glass with thin silver lines. Mrs. Drew appeared at the doorway. "Everything all right, Mrs. Hale?" Lena turned sharply. "Yes, I just lost signal." The woman's gaze lingered on the phone. "Perhaps you shouldn't be using it so much. The master prefers peace when he's away." Lena forced a smile. "Of course." As soon as the housekeeper left, she sank into the armchair, her heart pounding. Who was that woman? A prank? Or one of the wives she'd seen in the portraits? Lena Hale, 2018. No, that was impossible. Hours later, when Richard returned, she confronted him the moment he walked through the door. "Someone called me," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "A woman. She said things, terrible things about you." He froze mid-step. "What things?" "She said I should leave, that I'm not the first." He looked at her for a long moment, then laughed. Calm, dismissive. "Lena, people like me attract jealousy. My exes, their families, they like to stir trouble. It's probably one of them." "She sounded terrified," Lena whispered. Richard's smile faded. "You're letting your imagination run wild. This house can do that to people. It's too quiet." He reached for her phone on the table. "May I?" She hesitated but handed it over. He pressed a few buttons, scrolling. "Private number? No record? See? Harmless." Then, almost casually, he slipped the phone into his pocket. "I'll keep this for now. For your own peace of mind." "Richard." "Lena." His voice softened, almost tender. "You trust me, don't you?" She nodded slowly, though the air felt colder. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake listening to the faint tick of the clock and the hum behind the West Wing door. The words echoed in her mind. "You're not the first one." At some point near midnight, she heard movement downstairs. Footsteps. A low murmur. Carefully, she slipped from bed and crept into the hall. The house was dark except for a thin light spilling from under the study door. Peering through the crack, she saw Richard speaking on the phone, voice low, controlled. "Yes, I handled it," he was saying. "No, she doesn't suspect yet, but we'll have to move sooner than planned." Lena's hand flew to her mouth, the words blurred under the pounding in her ears. When she slipped back into the bedroom, she tried to steady her breathing. The phone was gone, the doors were locked, and outside the rain had stopped, replaced by a silence so complete it felt like the world itself was listening. Lena woke to the sound of rainwater dripping from the gutters outside and the hollow echo of her own heartbeat. Richard was gone again, his side of the bed untouched, his scent fading from the pillow. The mansion seemed emptier than before, its silence heavier, as if the walls themselves knew what she had overheard the night before. She dressed quickly and walked to the window, fog rising over the vineyard like ghostly smoke. Somewhere out there, she thought, someone had once stood where she stood now. Another woman with the same last name. Another Mrs. Hale. The thought made her stomach twist. Downstairs, Mrs. Drew moved quietly through the dining room, polishing silver that already gleamed. Lena offered a polite, "Good morning," but the woman didn't respond. Her silence had changed. It wasn't merely dutiful now. It was defensive, watchful. Lena dead to explore again. She told herself it was curiosity, but deep down she knew it was fear. The mansion was a puzzle, and the missing pieces were buried behind locked doors. She started in the west wing. The hum she'd heard so many nights before was louder here, pulsing softly behind the third door on the right. She tried the handle. Locked, as always. But this time she pressed her ear to the wood. Faint clicks, a low mechanical rhythm, like a generator or medical equipment. Her pulse quickened. She searched the nearby rooms for keys, drawers for hidden compartments. In a narrow hallway, she found a closet lined with old coats and boxes marked Estate Records, 2018 to 2021. She opened one, her hands trembling. Inside were photographs, candid shots of women on the property, smiling at the vineyard, standing by the fountain, sitting at the grand piano. All of them looked like her. Every single one. Beneath the photos were files, passport copies, medical forms, and letters signed Elena, Margaret, Tessa, and finally, Lena Brooks. Her maiden name. But the document read Lena Hale. Active file. She dropped the papers, heart racing. "Looking for something, Mrs. Hale?" She spun around. Mrs. Drew stood at the end of the hallway, eyes sharp, her voice calm as if nothing was amiss. I was just trying to find the laundry room," Lena stammered. Mrs. Drew's gaze lingered on the open box, then returned to Lena's face. "This part of the house isn't for guests." "I live here," Lena whispered. The housekeeper's expression softened, just slightly. "Then I'd advise you to act like you belong." The words chilled her more than a threat would have. When Mrs. Drew left, Lena gathered what she could, one photo, one letter, and hurried back to the bedroom. She locked the door and spread the documents across the bed. Each woman's file ended with a date, a few months apart. The last one be, for hers, Tessa Hale, deceased, vineyard accident. But there were no news articles, no obituaries, no trace of those women anywhere online. It was as if they'd been erased. By evening, Richard returned, smiling as if the day were perfectly ordinary. "You seem tense," he said, loosening his tie. "I'm fine," she lied. He watched her carefully. "You've been exploring again." Her breath caught. "Why would you think that?" "Because," he said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face, "the West Wing door was unlocked when I came in." Lena froze. "I didn't—" "It's all right," he interrupted, his tone gentle but firm. "Curiosity is human. But some things in this house are private, for your own safety." He kissed her forehead and left her standing there, heart pounding, too afraid to move. Hours later, long after he'd gone to bed, Lena crept downstairs again. The West Wing hallway was dark, But this time she noticed something new. The door that had always been locked now stood slightly ajar. Inside, the faint hum grew louder, mixed with the soft beeping of a machine. She pushed the door open slowly and froze. Under a thin white sheet on a hospital bed lay a woman, pale, motionless, her features eerily familiar. Lena's breath hitched. It was the woman from the portrait. Lena Hale. Her hand flew to her mouth as the monitor's rhythm quickened. The woman's eyes twitched beneath closed lids. Not dead, not alive, caught between. A sound behind her, the creak of a floorboard. Lena turned. Richard stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Now you've seen," he said softly. Lena's scream caught in her throat. Richard stepped closer, the dim light from the machines flickering against his face. His calmness was worse than anger. His voice measured, almost soothing. "She's not dead," he said, gesturing toward the motionless woman. "Elena's resting. A condition. She suffered an accident before you came here. I keep her comfortable." Lena's eyes darted between him and the woman. "You said she was family." "She is," he replied, smiling, faintly. "My wife. My first." The words hit like a blade. "Then what am I?" "You're my second chance." His tone softened, almost tender. "Don't make me regret it." He stepped closer. Lena backed away until her shoulder hit the cold metal bed frame. The beeping grew faster. For a moment, the woman's lips twitched. Or maybe it was just Lena's imagination. Richard sighed, almost pitying. "You shouldn't have seen this." Her instincts screamed, "Run." She shoved past him, bolting into the corridor. Her bare feet slapped against the marble floor, her breath coming in sharp bursts. Behind her, his footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, confident. He didn't need to rush. He knew every lock, every corner. Lena raced up the stairs, through the darkened hallways, fumbling for any exit. Every door was locked, every window sealed. She could hear him calling softly, his voice calm and steady. "Lena, let's not make this harder than it has to be." She ducked into the study, slamming the door and dragging a chair beneath the handle. Her chest heaved as she searched frantically. The desk drawers, locked. The fireplace, cold, unused. Then she saw a small safe behind a painting, its door slightly ajar. Inside were passports, jewelry, and a thick folder marked insurance claims. She opened it with shaking hands. Each file bore a name: Lena Hale, Tessa Hale, Margaret Hale, all declared deceased. The policies had been paid out to Richard Hale, beneficiary. He'd been marrying them, killing them, and cashing in. Her breath caught on a sob as she backed away from the desk. The doorknob rattled once, twice. "Lena," Richard's voice murmured through the wood, patient, almost gentle. "Don't be afraid. I was going to tell you everything soon. You're not like them." Her eyes darted toward the window. It was old but wide enough. She grabbed the brass poker from the fireplace and smashed the glaco. Isen shards scattered across the floor. The cold night air rushed in. "Lena!" His voice turned sharp, the mask slipping. She climbed out onto the narrow ledge, gripping the window frame, her palms bleeding. Below, the vineyard stretched into blackness, the moonlight glinting off wet soil. She jumped. The ground hit hard, pain shooting through her leg, but she forced herself to crawl through the mud and vines. The wind howled, whipping her hair into her face. Somewhere behind her, the mansion lights flared. He knew she was gone. She limped toward the back gate, but the iron bars were padlocked. Panic rose in her throat. She searched her pockets. Nothing. Then she saw headlights slicing through the fog. His car. He was circling around. She darted toward the old tool shed she'd noticed earlier. Inside, the air reeked of oil and dust. She found a rusted pair of pliers, hands trembling as she worked at the padlock chain. Her breath came in ragged bursts. The metal bit into her fingers, drawing blood. Behind her, the distant sound of gravel crunching. Footsteps again. She yanked the chain free just as a flashlight beam swept across the field. Richard's voice drifted closer, cold and unhurried. "You'll freeze out here, Lena. Come back inside. I can forgive this." She slipped through the gate and ran into the trees, branches slashing her arms. The forest swallowed her, its darkness thick and merciless. Her lungs burned, her vision blurred. Every sound, the snap of twigs, the wind, became him. At last, the distant hum of a road reached her ears. She stumbled toward it, collapsing at the edge of the asphalt. A truck's headlights appeared, bright, blinding. She waved frantically, screaming for help. The driver braked hard, leaping out. "Miss, are you hurt?" She tried to speak but only managed a whisper. "He's coming." The driver helped her into the truck, slamming the door shut. As the engine roared to life, Lena looked back through the rain-streaked window. At the end of the driveway, half shrouded in mist, Richard stood beneath the mansion's archway, watching her go. He didn't chase. He didn't shout. He only smiled, calm, certain, as if the escape was part of his plan. As the truck sped down the winding road, Lena pressed her forehead to the cold glass, fighting the rising panic. She was free for now, but she knew he'd find her, and somewhere deep inside, she realized the truth. His reach went far beyond that house. The forest seemed endless as Lena crawled through mud and tangled roots, her hands and knees raw, her breaths ragged and shallow. Rain had stopped, but the night pressed down like a suffocating shroud, and every snap of a twig made her jump. She could still see the mansion in the distance, its lights blazing like a fortress, and a cold, insidious certainty gnawed at her. He would not let her go. The truck that had rescued her earlier had dropped her near a small country road. She stumbled onto it, scanning the black horizon for signs of civilization. There was none. Only the distant flicker of a farmhouse light. With no other choice, she ran, dragging her injured leg, every step aching but urgent. Behind her, a figure emerged from the shadows, tall, deliberate, moving with uncanny silence. Richard. His coat flapped in the wind, collar high, eyes glinting in the moonlight. Lena screamed, heart hammering, and sprinted blindly into the woods again. Branches whipped her face, tearing at her clothes. She fell to her hands and knees, mud clinging to her skin. The sounds of pursuit were relentless. Not a footstep, but a presence, breathing, calculating. Panic clawed at her throat as she scrambled over rocks and roots, the distant mansion shrinking but never disappearing from sight. She reached the edge of a small clearing, her chest heaving, when a rustling sound came from the trees. She froze. It wasn't him this time. A figure stepped into the pale moonlight, Mrs. Drew. Her expression unreadable, almost calm, hands empty, but purposeful. "You shouldn't have left," Mrs. Drew said softly, her voice carrying an edge of warning. "I'm not staying," Lena whispered, backing away. "Some doors, once opened, cannot be closed," the housekeeper said. And then, almost casually, she raised a hand, pointing behind Lena. Richard appeared from the tree line, moving faster now, his long coat flaring like a shadow. Lena turned to flee, but Mrs. Drew's calm presence pinned her in place. He caught her wrist in a vice-like grip, his voice a chilling whisper. "Lena, stop." She wrenched her arm, spinning, but his strength was impossible. Pain seared through her shoulder as he pulled her closer. "Why are you doing this?" she screamed. "Because you're mine," he said simply. "All of you, and you've seen too much." The clearing became a stage for violence. Lena fought with every ounce of strength, clawing at him, kicking, biting, but Richard was methodical, almost surgical. Mrs. Drew did not intervene, only watched, a silent sentinel of obedience. A branch snapped. Lena stumbled and fell, scraping her face and hands. Richard seized the moment, dragging her toward the forest edge. She felt the world tilt beneath her, breathless, cold, hopeless. Then a sudden noise, a truck engine revving, and headlights cut through the darkness. Lena's heart soared. She screamed, waving her arms frantically. The vehicle stopped and someone leaped out, a man with a flashlight. Richard paused, his grip on Lena loosening just enough. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. He studied the driver, then looked back at Lena. "You think you can hide?" he hissed. The man shouted, waving Lena toward the truck. Lena lunged, adrenaline surging, and scrambled into the vehicle. The doors slammed behind her. The engine roared to life. Richard stood in the clearing, rain-slick coat glinting in the moonlight. He did not chase. He only watched, calm, composed, unyielding, as if this temporary setback was already calculated. Inside the truck, Lena's breaths came in ragged gasps. Her hands shook uncontrollably as she pressed her forehead against the glass. "He's not human," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No one survives him." The driver kept glancing at the dark tree line. "We'll get you to the sheriff," he said firmly. But Lena's eyes stayed fixed on the mansion in the distance. Its lights blinked once, then vanished behind a ridge. The memory of the West Wing, the locked doors, the women in photographs, Elena, Tessa, Margaret, swirled in her mind. Richard's reach was vast, terrifying. She had survived the first encounter, but the night had shown her the depths of his obsession, his meticulous cruelty, and the price of knowing too much. As the truck sped down the winding road, Lena pressed her hand to her chest, the echo of screams still ringing in her ears. Somewhere behind the safety of the trees, the mansion waited. Silent, empty, watching, patient. And Lena knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that the battle was far from over. Weeks had passed since Lena's narrow escape, and the mansion stood like a tomb on the hill. The vineyard below was overgrown, its once immaculate rows now tangled and wild. The local authorities had finally been alerted after Lena's story reached the sheriff, and now a team of investigators combed through the estate, cameras flashing and boots echoing across marble floors. Detective Harris, a lean man in his 40s, led the group. He paused at the stone entrance, surveying the ivy-covered columns. "This place is massive," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Almost too empty." Inside, the silence was unnerving. Dust motes floated in streams of sunlight piercing the tall windows. The grandeur of the mansion was intact, polished floors, gleaming chandeliers, heavy drapes. But there was no sign of life. No furniture had been disturbed, no personal items left behind except a few scattered papers on Richard's desk. Lena had returned with them, sitting quietly in the passenger seat of the police vehicle. Her hands were trembling, clutching a blanket over her shoulders. She hadn't spoken much since the drive, only nodding when asked questions. The mansion, she realized, seemed almost aware of her presence. The investigators moved through each room systematically, taking photographs, measuring distances, and checking the West Wing, the place of Lena's first terrifying discovery. When they reached the locked door she had barely escaped from weeks ago, the lock was broken and the door swung freely. Inside, the hospital bed was gone. No machines, no traces of Lena Hale. Harris frowned, rubbing his chin. "It's like they were never here. The files, the photos, all gone." Lena felt a chill creep up her spine. "I saw them," she whispered. "All of them. Every woman Richard married. They were here, in that room." The detective gave her a long, appraising look. "And now? Gone." "Yes," Lena said. Her voice was barely audible. "Everything vanished." As they continued the search, the kitchen, dining hall, and bedrooms all told the same story: meticulously cleaned, emptied, and eerily silent. Lena's eyes kept drifting toward the windows overlooking the vineyard. The rows of vines, once carefully maintained, now waved like dark, restless fingers. In the library, Harris found a small stack of papers under a chair. They were financial records, showing Richard's name as beneficiary of several insurance policies, but the personal files of the women were nowhere to be found. Lena shivered as she flipped through the documents, each one confirming what she had suspected. The women had vanished, their lives erased from every official record. Outside, the officers checked the perimeter. No vehicles, no signs of a struggle. The mansion gates were wide open, swinging lazily in the wind. It was as if the house itself had swallowed its master and his secrets whole. Lena stepped out onto the front steps, the autumn wind biting at her cheeks. "He's gone," she said quietly, almost to herself. "Everything, and he's gone." Harris approached, notebook in hand. "Missing, yes, but he left traces, financial, legal. If he surfaces anywhere, we'll find him." She nodded, though doubt gnawed at her. She had seen how calculated he was, how patient, how meticulous. A part of her knew he wasn't just missing. He was hiding, waiting, and watching. When the team finished their investigation, Lena stood alone for a moment on the balcony overlooking the vineyard. The mansion loomed behind her, empty and lifeless, yet it felt alive in a way that made her skin crawl. The echoes of the women, the locked rooms, the mechanical hums, all of it lingered in the shadows. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long black shadows across the estate. Somewhere, deep in the house, a window slid open. Just a fraction, and a single silhouette disappeared into the night. Lena caught her breath, heart racing. She had survived. She had escaped. But the mansion, and the man who had ruled it, were still out there. She turned back to the detectives. "We need to be careful," she said softly. "He's not done yet. He'll come back." Harris gave a firm nod. "We'll do everything we can." But Lena knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The mansion's emptiness was a warning, and somewhere, Richard Hale was planning his next move. The mansion remained empty, yet Lena could feel it pulsing beneath her feet, a quiet heartbeat of memory and menace. She had returned with the authorities, but even their presence did little to soothe the lingering fear. Every hallway, every polished floorboard carried the weight of the women who had come before her, their lives erased, yet somehow present in the air, in the dust, in the faint smell of perfume that lingered in the corners. She walked slowly through the west wing, past the doors that had once been locked, imagining the room as it had been. Lena Hale, lying in the hospital bed, the hum of machinery, the photographs on the wall. Now, the room was stark, empty, silent. But Lena could still hear the whispers, fragments of laughter, soft cries, the faint scratching of fingernails on the floor. Detective Harris followed at a distance, careful not to disturb her concentration. "You're doing fine," he said gently. "Just stay with us." "I'm trying," Lena admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's like they're still here." Harris nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Echoes," he said. "The past leaves traces, even if the people are gone. Sometimes, that's the only way we know what happened." Lena knelt near the window overlooking the vineyard, her fingers tracing the frost on the glass. She thought of Richard, the calm, calculating presence that had nearly destroyed her. He had vanished, but his influence lingered like a shadow over every inch of the mansion. The women, the locked doors, the hidden files, all of it remained etched in her memory. A sudden sound made her jump, the faint creak of a floorboard upstairs. The officers were on alert, flashlights cutting through the darkness. Lena's pulse raced. "He's here," she whispered. Harris moved to the staircase, signaling the others to follow. Lena stayed close, heart hammering. But the hallway was empty, the rooms open and vacant. Only the echoes remained. She stepped into the grand ballroom, where light filtered through the tall windows, illuminating dust that danced like tiny specters in the air. Lena's eyes caught the old piano in the corner, its keys yellowed and worn. She remembered seeing one of the women sitting there playing a delicate melody. The photograph, the files, all reminders of lives taken and forgotten. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, the sound brittle, broken, a ghost of music. For a moment she imagined the women gathered around her, their faces pale and knowing, their eyes watching silently. Elena, Tessa, Margaret, all of them, present in memory if not in body. Then Lena heard it, a soft whisper, unmistakable, brushing against her ear. "Don't forget us." She spun around. The ballroom was empty. Only dust motes floated in the golden afternoon light. Detective Harris approached cautiously. "What is it?" "They're still here," Lena said, swallowing hard. "Even if he's gone, the mansion remembers them. I can feel it." Harris studied her, recognizing the weight in her eyes. Sometimes surviving is about remembering. Their stories, your story. It matters. Lena nodded, looking at the rows of windows overlooking the overgrown vineyard. Somewhere out there, beyond the estate, Richard Hale still moved in shadows, still plotting. But she had survived, and she had witnesses, and the echoes of the brides, of Elena and the others, were her guide. That night, she returned to her small apartment, away from the mansion, away from the memories, but the images haunted her. Every dream carried fragments, a door creaking open, a whisper in the hall, the mechanical hum from the west wing. Each memory reminded her of the lives erased and the danger still out there. She resolved she would not be silenced. She contacted journalists, law enforcement, and investigators, providing every detail she had memorized. The photographs, the insurance policies, the hidden files, pieces of a puzzle that could no longer be ignored. Yet in the quiet hours, when the city slept, Lena could still feel it. The weight of the mansion, the spectral presence of the brides, and the lingering certainty that Richard Hale's reach extended far beyond any mansion, any locked door, any witness. Somewhere, in the dark, he waited. And though he had vanished, his obsession with control, secrecy, and possession had left its mark on her, permanent, chilling, unforgettable. Lena knew the story wasn't over. The echoes of the brides whispered in her mind, warnings, memories, lessons carved into the mansion's bones, and she would carry their voices forward, exposing the truth for as long as she could breathe.